about how to prevent a tragedy of a fire or an accident in your home or your apartment building from turning into a catastrophe. And really the main point of this is to make sure that your insurance is good. Let's talk a little bit about what happens when there's a fire in your home, in an apartment building, as a tenant, as a homeowner. What do you need to know? Insurance carrier comes in, and the insurance carrier has a responsibility to uphold their obligations under your insurance policy. And their responsibility is to cover the replacement cost value of the property, to cover any liability that comes from the covered losses related to the fire or whatever disaster, a flood, other things like that. Apartment building owners also have, as a part of their policy, coverage for loss of rent. So you may not know this, but when the building is no longer habitable by tenants, the landlord is getting rent coverage by the insurance carrier for a specified period of time. Now, if you don't get enough, if you don't get enough coverage for loss of rents, or you haven't updated your total rent roll, you rented a unit, you got more rent, you could run short on loss of rents coverage and lose money that way. So it's something to be careful about. There are two different kinds of insurance: basic form and special form. Basic form insurance basically says you have insurance for this list of potential damages: fire, flood, storm damage, whatever, and anything else that could come up that damages the building, like a car that drives into the building, driven by a drunk driver and damages the foundation. That won't be covered because it's not specifically listed. That's basic form. Special form coverage says you have coverage for everything except these listed exclusions. This is obviously a better way to have insurance. Liability coverage is another thing that is really important to pay attention to. Liability coverage is if you're the landlord and you have a disaster and it causes damage and you're responsible for it. Let's say you are doing some work yourself and you cause a fire to take place because you did some faulty wiring. You as the landlord are responsible for that. Your insurance carrier will cover you for that. But if you cause injury or damage to somebody and you don't have adequate liability coverage, you could be personally responsible. So that's what I mean when I say turning a tragedy, a bad disaster, a fire, a flood or something, into a catastrophe, because not only do you lose your building, now you start to lose other things like your home or your pension or other assets that you might have. Other apartment buildings start to come under fire based on the fact that you don't have enough liability coverage. The standard level of liability coverage for most property owners has been about $1 million. That's not enough these days. You probably need two, depending on the size of the building. You may need to have additional. When we talk about insurance, a lot of times I think tenants, every tenant needs to have renter's insurance, even if they think the landlord's policy covers them, because the landlord's policy doesn't. When tenants move into a building, I tell them that the condition that the apartment is in before they've moved in is what is covered by the landlord's insurance policy. So there are hardwood floors in there, there's freshly painted walls, there's a nice kitchen, there's a good bathroom, there's a washing machine, dryer, gas stove, those kinds of things. That's covered. The minute you unlock the door and put your keys down inside, that's the first thing that's not covered. Everything else you put into that place isn't covered by the landlord's insurance policy. Furthermore, if there's some sort of a disaster, there's a fire, you're displaced from your unit, you also don't have any coverage, any help from anybody else to find another place to stay in while your place is no longer inhabitable. So if there's a fire, you will have to go find your own place. You're gonna have to pay for your own hotel or mooch off of some family member. And while you're doing that, your landlord can't be collecting rent from you, because the landlord will be collecting the rent from the insurance carrier under their loss of rents coverage. But at the same time, you're going to be on the hook for a hotel, or you're going to have to go rent another apartment, and you're going to have to maintain your residence in the original building until the damage has been repaired. That's some of the things that you need to know, some of the details related to insurance. I have to absolutely emphasize for tenants, renter's insurance is going to be one of the best things you ever get. Your basic renter's insurance policy, may cover $250,000 or $500,000 worth of liability coverage. It's really important to have. If you don't have renter's insurance and you're a tenant, and you're on the show today and you're watching, I recommend you go get a quote right away. It's really not that expensive, and it's going to provide you with the kind of coverage that you need in any sort of a catastrophe where you're not able to be in place. Once again, even if it's not your fault, even if it's your neighbor upstairs who, lets the bathtub overflow because they fall asleep in the tub and there's a flood in your apartment, or their toilet backs up and your apartment is no longer habitable while the repairs are being made, your insurance carrier will provide you with a place to stay, and you'll have assistance from an insurance company because they want you to get back into the place as soon as possible.